Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? A weekly video podcast features creatives, writers, and readers when we come together to talk about books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of 4 novels and counting. I am so glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy our next guest. I am so excited to introduce to you a debut poet and my dear childhood friend, Maxine Smith-Pendarvis. Hey, Maxine.
Hi, Karen. Always
I,
good to
this is
see you.
this is so cool. So Maxine has been writing inspirational essays forever, but when COVID hit,
Mhm.
something in her spirit, she's going to tell us more about that, just got her writing poetry, and she's been writing ever since. And now her first book is out. Can you show us the beautiful cover?
Sure, I can. Here it is. Let me push this in. How's that?
Inspired. Isn't that beautiful? All right, so let's talk about this. So tell us about your writing journey. You mentioned that you kind of started at COVID, but what was that like? What happened? How did you get going with this?
First of all, Karen, I'd like to thank you for having me on this show, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. In answer to your question, yes, it started during COVID, a time that I found very, as many people did, very sad, filled with grief. And I was surrounded by that. And at the same time, my late husband had been diagnosed. He had had a stroke 19 years and he had survived. But during the time of COVID, he got diagnosed with, I would say, an incurable illness at that time. So I was faced between having to deal with his his health challenges and what it would mean to us, and then also to look around at what was going on and see a lot of grief and loss in the world. And of course, I was affected by it like many of us. And it was during that time of isolation. We were forced to lock down, if you remember. We were limited in going out that I decided at that time, I started to feel very weak in my faith. I've always considered myself to be a woman of faith, and God has brought me through so much, especially 19, 20 years, wonderful years with my husband, who was still functioning, um, and with love friends. And it was during that time of that loss and that grief that I decided that my faith wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I made the conscious decision that during lockdown time, isolation time, I was going to reconnect with God. I was going to remember that time when I first met him, as that song would say, to go back to that time where I first met him, where I was so enthusiastic. As a new Christian, I read my Bible faithfully every day. I would meditate 6 o'clock in the morning, and there were times that I would even miss a meal instead of missing that time with him, reading the Bible. But along through the years, it waned. You get caught up with the work, with working, with other situations. And I chose this time where, again, I was confronted with loss and grief in my personal life and what was going on to reconnect.
Mhm.
What I did was I consciously started I started remembering what I did back then. And then I remembered that you got up at a specific time every day. I faithfully read my Bible. I would journal. And I started doing the same thing, just reading and rebuilding my faith. And it was then during that time, and one of the disciplines and I had back then was to wake up approximately 6 o'clock in the morning, early in the morning, when everything was quiet. And I would sit in the quiet. And I began doing this. And as I started reading my scriptures and my inspirational books and sitting in the quiet, words started flowing into my mind in the form of poetry. And I must admit, too, I love music. I love my gospel songs. So the words from the gospel songs and the music that I've heard, I'm sure that triggered it. And I would sit in the quiet and I would hear the words from a song or just special words come. And next thing I know, in my mind, I'm creating a poem. And
Wow.
what I learned to do was I started writing it down.
Hmm.
Oh, and then it's as if it what it was like as if it was um everything was clogged up. And during this time it opened up. It opened up that inspirational part of me, that writing part of me, which you mentioned I've always written. I had my journal when I was a teenager. I've always written, but I've gotten away from that. And
And it
during this time,
blossomed.
it
It
blossomed.
re-blossomed. So that's beautiful.
It
So
is.
then you started writing these poems.
I
And
was, yeah,
at
I
what
did write
point,
it. Hmm.
at what point did you think like, okay, but I've got a book here. You know, you because you had all of these handwritten books and books and books of poetry. So what made you decide I ought to publish this book? What was that decision like?
I did not make that decision. I did not make the decision. Over the years, and I must tell you this, during the time of lockdown of COVID and thereafter, I ended up with four handwritten books.
Mhm.
This first one is only one of the books. We have three more books to come, plus those that I'm writing even now. Up to this morning, a poem came into my head. But anyway, what happened is I started sharing my poems with my friends.
Mhm.
And more so, if there was something happening to them, those friends that I lost, and I did lose some friends during COVID, the poems would come and I would write a poem regarding the loss I felt or their passing, which were often read at funerals. So what happened is I had these different poems, and I was encouraged by my friends um, to put it in a book. And I said, okay, one of these days I'll put it in the book when I write all four, when I type up all four books. So it took me forever to even type one book. And I said, and again, they would remind me. I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I would go on vacation. And then one day, I'm very close to my son, my creative son, Jason. I must have read him a poem because I would call them up and read a poem to him. And he said, Mommy, when are you going to put this in a book? I said, when I type up. He said, Mommy, you know what? Send me whatever you typed up now. I will put it in a book and get it in a book for you. So I said, oh, okay. So I went immediately to my computer and every poem I typed, I went, boop, 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 boop. I didn't even know what poem the title was, but he said to send it to him. And I sent it to him. And he is the one that really has made it happen for this beautiful book to be done. All I did, Karen, was I just gave him the poems. And he took it and he put together the poem, the layout, and I could show you the beautiful graphic work, the
Yes,
cover of
let's
the
look at
book.
that. Let's look at some of the
Let's look
graphics
at it.
because
Yeah, this is the
Jason
book.
did such beautiful,
Beautiful.
beautiful illustrations inside.
Okay, inside. Okay. Um, okay. Let me start with if I could come across some there. I want to get to his illustration. Well, even just for instance, this is just something. This is about the author, and do you see he has there a butterfly,
Mhm.
right? But let me go into.
So when you go further back, though,
Let me
there's
go
some
further
really
in. I will go
gorgeous.
into. Yeah,
Um,
I will go into it. Something oh, here it is. Here it is, right here at the table of contents. This is the table of contents for the book or part of the book, and here is part of his artwork.
Yeah.
From the table of contents is one artwork that he did. And then something I like that he did, the poem book is divided into different titles: inspiration, hope, faith, and of course the light touch, and love, and love. And before each of that, he put this together to just show you. And just like the I is for inspiration, when it comes to L, it's love. He did the same, followed the same basic premises.
Yeah.
Uh, and
So
then
the
this is
yeah. So
one thing
those
I like.
really beautiful. The drawings are so lovely, and I think they enhance the book
Yes,
so much. But
here's
I
another
bet,
one.
oh, there's another nice one.
Here's another
Yes.
wise one. And one that I like that he is very creative. And one of my poems um, is called The Hands of God. And this is what he did right alongside the hands of God. He literally did some artwork where he put it right
That's
there to
beautiful.
exemplify the hands. So throughout the book, you will see, as you said, his graphic work, which really
Yeah.
which
So
enhances.
while we're in the book, how
Yes.
about you read us a couple of poems?
Okay. I did not plan to, but I will, since mentioned the hands of God, which really, the hands of God is actually one of the first poems that I wrote. And that was written around 1985. And this is 2024.
Mm,
So I wrote it, it was the very first poem. And something I would like to add, each of the poems that I have written, again, this came into my spirit. I wrote what is called an explanatory note. And what the explanatory note is, it explains what inspired me, what motivated me to write the
right
poem.
this book.
So each poem will have that to help the reader understand what what it was that motivated me or inspired me to
Mhm.
write it. And it just adds a little something. So here it is, The Hands of God. It's very short. It's called The Hands of God. The hands of God from above guides us in wondrous ways of love. We need not worry, fear, or fret. Only His good will He manifest. When times are dark and we despair, fear not. Just know He is always near. He guides us when the way seems dim, for He lives within. He lives within.
That's beautiful. That's
Okay.
beautiful. Can you read us another one?
And it's interesting. I I didn't put it in one poem. We separated it, but I did a trilogy. I had the hands of God, and I also wrote about the voice of God.
Mm,
All right. And
I
this,
remember that one.
yes, the voice of God. As I mentioned, that it would be in the early morning that I would be inspired to hear the voice of God speaking the words to me that I could share and put in a poem. And most of my poems are written in the midnight hour, in the quiet time, early in the morning. And this was written one morning when I woke up very early, one of the many mornings. And the voice of God, in the quiet of the morning, I listen to hear God's voice, words spoken filled with power to let me know He's available every hour. He then speaks to me in a clear voice, reminding me He's near. His Holy Spirit is my guide, never to leave me, never to leave from my side. The voice of God continues to speak of Jesus' love for humanity, a love that is patient, kind, and true, who gave His life for me and for you.
That's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And I would like to just read this explanatory note.
Okay.
It said, during my prayer time, I read into scripture how God's voice was heard by men and women. I began to imagine what it would be like to hear His voice And thus I penned my poem based on this,
Yeah.
right? Because men
That's
and women
just
are old. Yeah. And
okay. One more.
one more. And the book is called Inspired. And I wrote this poem titled Inspired. And it is inspired. God, you've inspired me to do what I thought was impossible, leading me in ways to achieve my goals, my present help in times of doubt. Promises you've made are kept in my heart. You're a faithful friend, God, who will never depart. Guiding me in all I strive to do. I dedicate my life, my accomplishments to you. And so be
Those are
it.
beautiful, Maxine Joy. Those are beautiful, beautiful
Thank
poems.
you, Karen.
So, so you mentioned that you
Mhm.
had four books, and this is only one. So you're working. So, and besides new poems, you're working on getting the other books published.
Yes, I am. I'm starting to type. I hope it doesn't take me 2 or 3 years as the first one did. But yes, I am starting to type the poems. I have them written, they're waiting, so I am going to type them and edit them at the same time. And possibly, I don't know when, I will not give a date, but possibly it's the New
Sometime in
Year's beginning, a New Year's beginning. So sometime next year, we may have another one come out.
sounds wonderful. Debut poet turning into multi-book writer. I love it. I love it. So, one of the things, so the name of the show is What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? And we like to hear about books that have helped shape you, books that you have read, maybe that inspired you, that inspired you to write the poems that you wrote or affected your writing style. Can you
Mhm.
share any books that have had a big impact on you?
I would like to share a book. Um, I started reading it recently when I thought about putting when it was presented to me to put the book together.
Okay.
All right.
So
And
when
of course,
Jason pushed you.
yes, when my son pushed me, and I went on my shelf and I found that I had several books by poets. And I found this book, which is wonderful, and I'll explain how it inspired. It's called Healing Thoughts. Here it is.
Mm,
Beautiful cover, isn't it?
it is
It's a
beautiful.
beautiful cover, and it's by Julia Niels Sykes. And if you can, this is Julia. All right. And I started reading it. I opened it up. But what attracted me to the book was she wrote her poems, many of them, during her time of loss and grief.
Mm,
And with that, I was able to really connect to the book and to her. And another thing is, um, she started writing this as a senior citizen. She's not ashamed about her age. I think she said she was like 65 when she started writing this
mm,
book. I started young, but it's only now at this age, it's becoming a book.
yeah.
And another thing that connected me to her is she had lost her husband. And it was through the loss of her husband that it really, using the word, inspired her to write this book.
Mm,
And many of her poems are about her husbands and about um, different things that happened to her, and also about life and inspirational. Like my eyes just went to a title, and it says, "This too shall pass." So her poems
mm,
are very inspirational, which appealed to me. So I had that connection with her with the loss of her husband. Then also, a year after I lost my husband, our dog Charlotte, our beloved
mhm,
pup, she passed away. And she had a cat, and I dedicated my book to my husband Eugene, my late husband Eugene, and to my not my dog Charlotte, right? And she dedicated again. her book to her husband and to her cat Fluffy. So there was such a connection, and just speaking to you about it, I may contact her, find her website, and just let her know how she and her book has really inspired me. And
That's such a great point, Maxine.
yeah,
As an author, we so are moved when our poems, like when you share your poems with friends and you see how they touch them, that has such an impact on you. So I bet you contacting her and telling her how much you have in common and how inspired, how she inspired you, I bet that will have just as strong impact as when people come up to you and say, "Oh my goodness, Maxine, your poem was just so," and it was just right on time. It was just what I needed to read at this
yes,
moment.
yes,
That's really what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to connect with
yes,
with people. So people want to connect with you. You know
yes.
how you're going to get in touch with her, but people are going to want to get in touch with you. So how can people find you? How can they, where can they find your books? But also, how can they find you?
Okay, we have a website, and the website is mjspublishers.com. And if you go on that website, you will get more information about the book and possibly more to come. My son is in charge of it. Again, all I did was just get the book, but he's in charge of it and it's up, and he will be putting more information on it. And the book could be found on Amazon and Barnes and Noble at this time. Okay?
Excellent.
Right.
Excellent, excellent. Oh my goodness. So I hope that you all have enjoyed meeting and you've just like learned this much about my dear friend Maxine Joy. There's so much more to learn, but this has been such a fun thing. We've never done anything like this before, you and I. So this has
Um,
been so wonderful. I'm so glad you could come on my show. I'm so glad all of you joined us. I
yes.
hope that you will go and buy Maxine's book. And then I hope that you will let her know how
Mhm.
much you enjoyed it, how much it touched you, and that you met her. And what are you reading? What are you writing? Thanks, everybody, for watching, and I will see you next week. Have a great week, everybody. Bye bye.